Hey guys, this is Chris Law in EDL 856, Module 11. So for this module, we had a case study, and I'm going to go over the details of the case study. So Section 1, Summary of the Case. The school principal is concerned about the school's newly formed parents organization. They recently dissolved their affiliation with the PTA, the National PTA, and they're moving in a different direction. The principal thought that the PTA played a vital role in the past and quote-unquote said they were a force in education and did a great job supporting the school. He has a meeting with the representatives of the new school organization, and the leader of that organization is a young attorney who's quite boisterous about some of the changes that they want. So one of the things that they're proposing is they want the school to sponsor back-to-school meetings. They thought that in the past the back-to-school night was not as informative as it could have been, and they want to make some changes. So they wanted the school to sponsor a series of back-to-school meetings focusing on one or two subjects each evening, and then they want to have the parent-teacher conferences during the American Education Week. They also want to be involved in the decision and policy-making processes within the school. They want to be equal partners with the school because their children are in the school and they're involved in the educational process. They also want to have parent committees. So they've proposed, actually since they proposed, they've already set up a committee on discipline, teacher performance, curriculum, and total school evaluation. And they also plan on collecting data from students, from teachers, and from parents. The principal was surprised by these demands. He was not informed about the committees. They had met separately and created these committees without any kind of consent or any kind of feedback from the principal. And he's worried that there's going to be interference with the normal operations of the school if these demands are implemented. And he's especially worried about the accountability. If something goes wrong, is it going to fall on him or will it fall on the new parent organization? Section 2, Legal and Ethical Issues. Parents want to become equal partners with the school in deciding what's best for their children. As I mentioned, they want involvement and a seat at the table for decision-making and policy-making processes, and they've already set up committees and established roles on those committees. The issue is the principal is concerned about the role of this new parent organization in the school. So their role in the past has been more of a support, whereas right now what they're proposing would be way more intrusive and would definitely have an impact on the day-to-day operation of the school. The principal also is not happy about the proposed changes in the sense that he was not brought into the conversation, so there's certainly a lack of transparency there, and some of this, or most of this, was done behind his back. The committees, and if they are implemented, the impact they would have on the educational process, and also the legality of it, of these parents coming in who are not experts in the field, who do not have proper certification, evaluating school performance, evaluating teacher performance, and then collecting data from students and parents. There's a lot of legal issues that revolve around that. And then the role of the school board. You know, the school board hasn't consented to any of these proposed changes or demands. So you'd be interested to hear how they feel about it. And then also you look at parents. Is this just a small group of boisterous, power-hungry parents, or do all parents want these changes and some of these demands to be met? And then always accountability is a major legal and ethical issue. Is who's going to be blamed if some of these issues or some of these problems occur? You know, is it going to fall on the principal? Will it fall on the school board? Will it fall on the parent organization? You know, there's a lot of things that need to be hashed out. And then you look at the bylaws of the new parent organization. You know, there's nothing mentioned in the case study, but you wonder, have they created bylaws because they've discontinued their affiliation with the National PTA, where they would have had bylaws, but do they have bylaws now with the new organization that they've established? Section 3, Synthesizing the Information. The new parent organization is attempting to exert more power and expand their role and involvement in the school. However, the principal is concerned that the parents' demands will disrupt the normal operations of the school, and he's worried that he would be the one held accountable if anything went wrong within the school. Section 4, Synthesize the Facts. So the people, the principal, and the new parent organization. One of the great unknowns in this case study is we don't know how the other parents feel about some of the demands that are being offered up by the new parent organization. Do the parents overall, do they feel the same way as some of these boisterous, power-hungry parents, and do they want a seat at the table and more involvement? Or are they happy with the traditional role that the PTA played within the school and supporting the school and the staff of the school? And then you also wonder how the school staff feels about some of these proposed demands and changes. I would imagine that they're not too happy about having parents within the school and making some of these major decisions. Place, school, we do not know if it's an elementary, middle, or high school. And then program, the role and involvement of the parent organization. Section 5, review and prioritize the information. So the principal believes the parent organization plays an important role in the school. He's not trying to diminish or remove the parent organization. He's just trying to find a way that they can work collaboratively and also making sure that normal operations are not hindered. As I mentioned before, the PTA was given a greater role before they discontinued the affiliation. So prior to the discontinuation of the affiliation, the principal did provide a greater role for the PTA in planning annual parent and staff picnic, initiating parent-teacher conferences, and promoting the bond referendum for the addition of the school. So technically, the principal has, given them more power and more say than what they had traditionally. The new parent organization wants to be equal partners with the school. Again, they want a seat at the table for decision-making and policy-making processes, so that would clearly impact instruction and curriculum. And they've already established parent committees for what they believe will improve the educational experience for their children within the school. Several key questions. School board's reaction. I would imagine the school board would have something to say about some of the demands. Obviously, as a school board, you want parent involvement and parent engagement, but at the same time, there's a line, and it seems like many of these demands are going to cross that line. Also, the school board, you're afraid of setting a precedent. So if this new parent organization is able to implement some of the demands that they want, pretty soon that's going to be set across every school within that district. So as a school board, I'd be wary of that. Next one, school staff's reaction. I would imagine the school staff would not be happy about parents rating their performance, because clearly that would have an impact on teachers and how they teach and conduct their classes and how they deal with certain students. So I'd be interested to hear how the school staff would react to this. Input from other parents. Again, are these a small group of boisterous, power-hungry parents, or do all parents feel the same way and want some of these demands met? Legal and ethical concerns, there are certainly many, of what these parents can do, their role within the school, their role within instruction and curriculum and evaluation. There's a lot of legal and ethical concerns there. And then, of course, accountability. Is this going to fall on the school board? Is this going to fall on the superintendent? Is this going to fall on the principal? Is this going to fall on the new parent organization? There's a lot of key questions that revolve around accountability that are not answered. Section 6, identify the options and possible consequences. So option A, no action. If the principal takes no action or makes no decision, then the new parent organization will sense weakness and probably up their demands and want even greater control. And then you also look at perception among school staff. If the principal bends and allows these demands to be implemented, then the school staff is going to feel like they're not being supported by the principal, and the principal is going to lose support within his own school. And then you look at perception from the school board and superintendent. So if the principal doesn't handle this in the right way, it could lead to a negative perception from the school board and superintendent that the principal is not a strong leader and cannot handle some issues or even possible adversity. Option B, most comprehensive. The principal should consult with the school board and the superintendent regarding the parent organization's demand. So the principal should set up a meeting with the school board and superintendent and go over some of the demands and how it got to this point. And then I think it's very important that everybody, and when I say everybody, I mean the principal, the school board, and the superintendent, figures out a clear role and guideline for parent organization and set policy for what can and cannot be done within the school system, and then provide a very clear rationale for why that's going to be the case. And then I also think it's important for the school board, superintendent, and principal to survey key stakeholders. So survey parents and find out exactly what they want. Do they have some of the same demands and concerns as this parent organization? Or are they happy with the way the school is operating, and are they happy with the traditional role that the parent organization has had in supporting the school? And then find out from staff, how do they envision cultivating relationships with parents and engaging parents? And how do they see creating kind of a shared vision with parents within the school system, but also making sure that it's not invasive and making sure that they feel comfortable with the setup? Option C, possible alternative, the principal can try to compromise with the parent organization. So the principal would have to sit down with the parent organization and get them to understand that they need to respect the principal's role and accountability, because if anything does go wrong, most likely it would fall on the principal. They need to respect and understand the school's normal operations and how that cannot be hindered. And then also the appropriate committees, if they are implemented. I mean, not all those committees are appropriate within the confines of the school based on the lack of certification and expertise that those parents have. So they would need to figure out input and obviously get some data from some of the surveys in order to figure out an appropriate way to move forward and implement some of these committees, so that there is some of that two-way communication where the parent organization still feels like some of their demands are met and some of the issues that they have are being addressed, but at the same time they respect the autonomy of the school and also the accountability that the principal would have to take on. Section 7, evaluate the options. So option A, if no action is taken, some of the pros, principal would avoid conflict with the parent organization and the parents would become more involved in the school, which lead to greater engagement. Cons, perceive weakness from the parent organization and how they could step up some of their demands. Perceive weakness from school staff and how the principal would start to lose support within his own school. And then also lack of leadership. This would probably send a negative message and perception to the school board and superintendent. Option B, most comprehensive. So the pros, it would involve more stakeholders. The school board and superintendent would be involved, so there's transparency there. They would set policy and guidelines for the parent organization, which seems like they do not have as the district, which would certainly be helpful in this case. They should survey stakeholders, collect data from parents and staff, and hopefully find really how all stakeholders feel about parent organization and the role that the parent organization should have within the schools. Some of the cons, it's clearly going to upset the parent organization, in this case the young attorney. They won't be happy that the principal took this step. And then also some of the potential lack of involvement from the parents. This might push parents to move in the other direction where they're not involved and not engaged in the school, and clearly that would have an adverse effect on parent engagement, student engagement, and then I would imagine student achievement as well. Option C, possible alternative. Some of the pros, it shows to the parent organization their value and that they are wanted. Work cooperatively for the betterment of students' education. Some of the cons, potentially give the parent organization too much power, because if you leave the door open or you crack the door, they might eventually start taking on more and more. And then the perception among staff members. Again, I would imagine a lot of staff members are not going to want some of these changes. So that's another thing to consider, that you might lose support within the building. Section 8, best option. To me, the best option for the principal is clearly option B. In this case, he covers all his bases. You bring in the school board, you bring in the superintendent, who are superiors to the principal. So now they're involved in the process. You set clear policy and guidelines for the role of parent organizations and what they're able to do and not able to do within the schools. You survey parents, so you're collecting data from them about what they want, what they need, and what they expect the role of the parent organization to be within the school. You survey staff to figure out the role of the parent organization in the school and ways in which maybe the school can increase engagement and improve their ability to cultivate relationships with parents. And in this case, all stakeholders are involved. So from the top down, all stakeholders are involved in this process. So Section 9, implementing the decision. The principal would set a meeting with the school board and the superintendent. They would review the parent organization's demands. They would survey stakeholders. They could do this by sending out surveys digitally via email, posting it on the school website, text blaster. I would imagine they would do this in multiple languages based on the demographics of their school. They would also survey school staff. They would collect and analyze all that data and get a chance to look at those numbers and look at those responses. And based on that data, they would set district policy that clearly outlines the role, expectations, and guidelines for parent organizations for all schools, not just this school, but all schools in the district, so that everybody's operating on a uniform system. They would also clearly outline the principal's accountability, so that if something does go wrong, it's very clear of who's going to be accountable for that. The district would communicate this message to all policyholders, all stakeholders. So they could do this on the school website, they could do this via email, they could hold meetings at school, physical meetings, they could use social media, text blaster, but I think it's very important that they provide a rationale for the policy, and also some of the legal and ethical issues should be included within this rationale. The principal would then set a meeting with the new parent organization, and they would talk about, based on the new guidelines, how they could collaborate collectively and engage under this new policy, how they can improve the relationship and cultivate that relationship between the school and parents and the rest of the community. They should come up at this meeting with shared goals and a shared vision for how they want to improve the educational process. And I also think two-way communication is very important. It's important that the principal understands what the parents want and why they want that, but it's also important that the parents understand how a school must function and operate, and they need to respect that as well. Once that is done, the policy should be posted on district and school websites so that everybody knows the expectations and guidelines and where everybody stands. Section 10, questions to consider. First question, in what types of situations can family and community stakeholders be helpful? I think especially the creation of mission and vision statements. As a principal, you want to know what the goals are of that community. So what are the goals of parents for their children and their children's education? What's the goal of the community? How do people who don't have children in the school, how do they feel about the school system and what they want to come out of that school system? And then local businesses. Again, it's really getting all stakeholders in the community involved. Next, engagement in child's education. Research clearly shows that parents who are educated in their child's education, those children do better in school, they achieve better, and also they have less behavioral issues. And then you look at the creation of learning environment at home. Teachers can work collaboratively with parents to model what that learning environment at home would look like and give parents strategies of how they can help and teach their children at home. And then community resources, looking at partnerships. So for example, in the city in which I work in, we have a community college, we have one of the best aquariums in the state, and our school district has a partnership with a community college where students can take classes there and get college credit while being in high school. And we also have a marine biology partnership with the aquarium where students can learn some of those skills firsthand and also get those experiences. So I think partnerships are very, very important. Next question, what strategies are effective for communicating school and student success to families in the community? I think you have to look at the technology that people use. So what are people using? What are they accessing? And then how do you get that out to the rest of the community? Because you want to promote that success to everybody. So email is a great way. Text blaster, we use that quite a bit within our district. That's been a very, very good way because everyone, for the most part, has a phone on them at all times. School website, so it's very clear and accessible on the school website. Social media, I know a lot of school districts now are using Facebook and Twitter. Local news outlets, maybe this is newspapers, maybe it's a local news station. And then it's very important that it's concise, easy to understand, and it's in multiple languages. So you have to understand your clientele and your demographics and be able to communicate that information to everybody. And the communication has to be consistent. All right, people have to get used to a certain cadence of the way that you communicate. Next, what strategies could a school leader use to communicate with parents and the community when English is not the primary language or where many languages are spoken? I think the first and foremost, it's important to determine what languages are spoken in the district. So this can be done by surveying students or by surveying parents when they register their children for school and figuring out what districts are spoken within the, what languages are spoken within the district. Once that's determined, all information that is sent home or disseminated should be in multiple languages to meet the needs of your stakeholders. So maybe that's posted on the school website or any communication, whether it be social media, email, all stakeholders need to have access to that information. Another great tool is Google Translate. It's becoming more and more prevalent within schools, and it's a great opportunity to bridge that gap. And then also YouTube. My school, they will post videos on YouTube, and parents have an option of clicking the closed caption, and they can actually read the captions in their own language, in their native language, of what's being said. So that's another great way to communicate. Next question, what criteria should be considered in developing programs, committees, or activities that include the community? Clearly you want data from surveys, but it's making sure that you get enough people to take those surveys so you have a very clear idea and get a good cross-section of what people want. Every community is different, and a lot of communities have very diverse needs, and figuring out what those needs are and how you can address those needs before developing some of these programs or committees. And then effective dissemination of information, again, whether that be digital, whether that be oral, maybe even written communication to people to get that information out. And then the last part is engaging and cultivating relationships with people. You know, if you've done that, there's a sense of trust there, and it will help as you start to develop programs and figure out what programs will meet the needs of those people. Committees, getting people involved. I mean, clearly you want community leaders on those committees, so you need to engage them and cultivate that relationship with them in order to get them on those committees. And then another question, how can a school leader use community resources to support student learning? I think first and foremost, as a school leader, you need to assess your community resources and figure out what resources you have in your community that's going to promote student learning. And then go from there, create partnerships, figure out ways in which your students can access some of those resources that they have that's going to promote learning. The partnerships are huge, and maybe that's an internship, maybe that's working with a local community college or university. Most communities have those resources. Schools just have to figure out how to tap into them. Next one, are there any legal constraints on the role that can be played by a PTA or parent organization in your state? I was unable to find any clear guidelines, like legal constraints, but I would imagine they cannot disrupt school operations in any way. And there are guidelines. I know at my school especially, there's guidelines for the role and expectation of the PTA. And it's very clearly outlined that the PTA is there to support the educational process. They're not there to impede, but to support it. And they're working to support school staff and students. All right, so it's not just fundraising, but there's a variety of other ways in which they can support school staff and students. And one of the ways in which my school has done that is they've created like Hispanic outreach program, African American parent group. So you're bringing in minority groups to get them more involved and more engaged in the educational process of their children. Next question, to what extent would certain school board policies restrict increased involvement by parents or a parent organization in your district? In my district, they must be affiliated with a national PTA, and they have to have a clearly outlined role of the PTA, and the PTA needs bylaws. They clearly outline guidelines and expectations for the PTA. So even if you have boisterous or power-hungry parents, they need to still follow the guidelines and expectations that are set out by the school board that's enforced by the superintendent and school leaders. And I think having that blanket policy for all schools makes it easy, because you don't want one school to set a precedent and then another school does something different. Or if you have a parent who's involved in an elementary school and then their child goes to middle school and then eventually high school, you want the process and the guidelines to be the same everywhere. And I think my district does a very good job of creating that. So thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it.